My name is Peter, and welcome to Pete's Guide to Doing Everything Better. This is step 1 in building the ideal mini metric toolkit, specifically a mini M6 toolkit. I created this channel to have a place to research and test and teach how to do everything that interests me better. My interest range from CAD to tools to history to food. And as you can see, I'm starting with this Vera Advent Calendar toolkit. This might be the best toolkit I've ever had. But this is not a cooking channel. So let's get the salt and pepper and the best bottle opener I've ever used out of the frame. And that leaves us with this beauty. So we've got a really slick case that fits in my hip pocket, a driver, a ratchet, an extender, a socket adapter for 1/4-inch drive sockets. And before I go any further, I need to tell you why I chose to start with M6 for my metric journey. And the answer is best explained in this gadget. This obviously is a smartphone tripod mount. And I've got 2 bolts, 2 screws screwed into it. These are not bolts. And if you know anything about photography, you know that the standard tripod mount is a 1/4-inch, 20 threads per inch. We call it 1/4-20. Female thread on the camera. And I can take these 2 screws and interchange them between these 2 1/4-20 female threads all day as long as I want. And the only thing you can tell in the difference between them from this camera angle, probably, is this screw doesn't screw in quite as far. This one screws in all the way. Maybe you can tell that the heads are different sizes and they've got different markings on them. So when I discovered this interesting fact, I realized this is where I wanted to start with metrication. This is the 1/4-20 screw, and this is a metric screw. 6mm diameter, 1 thread per millimeter, and the head size is a little different, a little smaller. So that's our starting point. The next step is figuring out which bits I need to remove to make this work only with M6 screws. So that means I need some sample screws. These are all of the M6 screws I've been able to find in my local area, which is basically Silicon Valley. And I need a place to put the bits that I'm not going to use for this project. So let's get started. And yes, this has become one of my favorite quotes. The best part is no part. This is the key to simplicity, ease of use, reliability. Make things as simple as possible and no simpler. And yes, those 2 quotes belong on the same level. So, first step, let's go left to right, and we'll start. Before I start figuring out which screws, which drivers match these screws, I need to teach you a key principle about screw drives. I first learned this as a kid with Phillips bits, but I think it applies to just about every single bit screw drive there is. So start with the largest drive that you think probably might fit, but probably not, and try it. So to use that rule, I actually need to start a few things. Well, no, we'll start left to right. So this is a 6mm hex bit. It doesn't fit there, it doesn't fit there, it doesn't fit there. So that can go in the bin. Now we have a 5mm bit. And again, we'll start left to right. Ah, we have a winner, finally. Okay, so we keep 5. And now we'll try 4. Nope. Yes. Nope. Okay, so this works one of those 3 screws. And that can go back in. And now we have a 3mm. And again, let's go left to right. Finally, this fits the smallest screw. So that's my M6 set screw with an Allen key. It doesn't fit any of these other bits, any of these other screws. So let's put that back in. Now, let's go on to what's next. Oh, we have more hex. We have hex cap screws. So I need my adapter. And we'll go, again, left to right. That spins, that spins, that spins. That's a slotted screw. So this can go somewhere else. And now we have the magical 10mm socket. And that spins, that works, and that works. So, and this is an important lesson. There's a joke in the metric community, mechanic community, of 10mm sockets disappearing frequently. And now you know the answer. It fits some types of M6 bolts, and since 6 M6 bolts are the functional equivalent of a quarter 20 in SAE units, that is the most common hex driver used in mechanisms. So here's an 8mm hex socket, and that finally fits the smallest M6 screw we have there. So that gets to stay in our toolkit. And next up, left to right, we've got slotted. Okay. Here is the slotted drive that came with this toolkit. And it works, but as you can see, it's sloppy. It wobbles back and forth. It doesn't fill up the full width. And that means it is not the right screwdriver for those screws. Next up, we have Phillips. So let's get my largest Phillips bit and see if this works. It does, but it wobbles a little, and I have reason to believe this is not the right size for that screw. This did not come with a number 3 Phillips, so I'm going to set that aside because I think we can do better. And that means we can test the number 1, and we know that's going to be sloppy. Yeah, that's way too sloppy. It might work in a pinch, but you'll damage both the screw and the bit. And next, we have a posi drive. I dislike posi drive, but I'm willing to do the experiment and see how these might be useful compared to Phillips. And again, this has a little bit of wobble, so it's probably not the right one. And we'll set it aside. And number 1 posi drive actually turns, to my surprise, but again, wobbles too much, and so it's not the right bit. And then we come to Torx. And again, let's start with the largest bit, which in this kit is a T25, and it turns, but it wobbles. And then in here it turns as well. We actually have two Torx screws here. So because it wobbles, that is not the right size, which means that we can remove all the other smaller Torx bits from this kit. This one kind of works again, but it wobbles. And I'm betting the last two will not turn the screws at all. Not a turn. This kind of works. Huh. Well, that's funny. Not in this one, not in this one, but it actually kind of turns the posi drive screw. I did not expect that. But don't do that at home, kids. And finally, we have the T10. And this will not turn any of these. Yeah, maybe, barely, if your life depends on it once. Okay, so I've removed all of the non-working bits from this kit that do not work with M6. And that means it's time to start adding bits. And before I add screwdriver bits, I want to add an important bit. You see, to build this holding frame to hold all of my test screws, I needed to drill and tap the holes. And why not do it with an all-in-one? This is a hex drive, 5mm drill, and 6mm tap. That turns out to be the right drill size for 6mm M6 screws. But I found problems with this, and when I looked at it more closely, I realized this has three features that should not be used on thin pieces of wood like this. Can you see them? Is it obvious to you? I'm going to talk about this in detail in a future video. But I've used these before. They're common in electricians' toolkits, and that realization really confuses me now that I understand the problems with this. So this is going to go in this toolkit, but we're going to do a test and evaluation on this later. And if you know the three problems that this has with thin wood like this, let me know down in the comments. And in the next video in this series, I'll start adding more bits to fit all these M6 screws. But that's all I've got on my brain today. This is PetesGuide, closing down.